"It is dangerous to be right in matters on which the established authorities are wrong." Voltaire. This quote could not be truer than applied to the ultimate failure of the German government during World War II. At a time when the general German population failed to protect the rights of Jews, Oskar Schindler demonstrated the true impact of the individual and characteristics of a real responsible citizen by subverting against his immoral government. After World War I, the German pride was hurt and the people were left vulnerable. In 1918, the Treaty of Versailles, a peace settlement between the fighting countries of World War I, was signed. Clause 231, the War Guilt Clause, stated that Germany was responsible for starting the war and resulted in Germany having to pay for all the damage done during World War I. Economically, Germany was drowning in debt, but the end of the war brought about an even bigger problem: the loss of German pride. The German ego was divided and destroyed. The people, who had little to do with the declaration of war, felt like they were being punished for the mistakes of the German government. They were not happy with the German leadership, which allowed the Nazi Party to rise to power with Hitler at its forefront. Hitler provided a final solution to promote German nationalism at the expense of human rights. In 1925, Hitler reorganized and ratified the Nazi Party with extreme ideas of anti-Semitism. Hitler began by taking away basic human rights from Jews. On September 15, 1935, the Nuremberg Laws were read at a public rally and took away German citizenship and the right to marry Aryans from the Jewish people. Hitler's goal was to convince his nation that the Jewish community was to blame for the fall of Germany and needed to be exterminated. Hitler did this through propaganda. Everywhere Germans turned, anti-Semitic ideas were being spread through all forms of media, including posters, books, films, and newspapers. It even reached children's books like this, in which Jews were portrayed as poisonous mushrooms threatening the well-being of the master race. It was easy for the German public to start believing the Jews to be a different race, the anti-race, because this ideal was engraved in New Germany's culture. Another major tool of the Nazis' propaganda assault was the weekly Nazi newspaper Der Stürmer, or The Attacker. At the bottom of the front page of each issue, in bold letters, the paper proclaimed, "The Jews are our misfortune." Der Stürmer also regularly featured cartoons of Jews in which they were caricatured as hook-nosed and ape-like. The influence of the newspaper was far-reaching. By 1938, about 500,000 copies were distributed weekly. Nazi propaganda instilled fear within the people that in order to be a true German citizen, siding with the Nazi Party was essential. Most of the German public held true to their government regardless of their emotions or morals because the fear to conform to the future Germany overpowered all other feelings. Among the millions of citizens being exposed to this propaganda was a typical German businessman who would later stand out as a hero and save thousands of Jewish lives. What sets this man apart was not necessarily his brains or his brawn, but rather his responsible and skeptical reaction to the propaganda. This man did not blame the Jewish people or prejudge them as inferiors as many of his German counterparts did, but sympathized with the Jews on a humanistic level. His name is Oskar Schindler. Oskar Schindler was born April 28, 1908. As a young man, Oskar was very much driven by ambition and money, seemingly unwholesome qualities. In 1938, he joined the Nazi Party not because he agreed with their ideals, but in order to further his career as a businessman. Oskar knew that being a part of the Nazi Party would link him with the most powerful and successful people of the time. He started his enamelware factory Amalia in 1940 and with the advice of Jewish accountant Isaac Stern, hired Jews from the Krakow ghetto as they were a source of cheap, reliable labor. Although they were hired as workers, Oskar treated them as equals and friends because race, blood, and soil meant little to him. The contrast between Schindler's treatment of the Jews and neighboring commandant of the Plazow camp, Amon Goeth's treatment is clear. Schindler is documented to have treated them humanely by feeding them twice as much food as other labor camps, as well as having a no abuse and no murder tolerance. His camp was considered a safe haven. During the same time period a few miles away, Jews were being terrorized, mistreated, and lived in constant fear of Goeth's random shootings from his balcony. "When you saw Goeth, you saw death," later recalled Schindler Jew Poldek Pfefferberg. Amon was among the many SS officers taught to be ruthless and cruel to Jews. It was not until the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto on March 14, 1943, that Schindler transformed from a friend of the Jews into a protector of them. After witnessing the shootings of hundreds of Jews, Schindler realized that his own Jews were in danger, and he began to shift all intentions towards saving them. No thinking person could fail to see what would happen. I was now resolved to do everything in my power to defeat the system. His loyalty lied more with his humanitarian responsibilities than his political obligations or his personal business goals. 1944. The most courageous act of Schindler was when he wrote the famous Schindler's List and saved 1,200 people by relocating his factory to Brunlitz after the Nazi Party threatened to send all his workers at the Plaszow subcamp away. Plaszow was changing from a labor camp to a concentration camp, which meant death was inevitable for most. Schindler's factory would soon be closed down along with the rest of the camp, so he knew his Jews would be exterminated if he did not move them. He approached SS officer Amon Goeth with bribes as well as the proposition that his factory must continue to supply the Third Reich with vital war supplies. Goeth took the money and promised Schindler any Jews he wanted. From there, Schindler constructed his list, with 1,200 names of his beloved Jewish workers. These were the workers that he promised to protect, fulfilling his previous oath. I'm going to get you out. I'm going to get you all out. Within the same year, he would prove his loyalty to the Jews once again. Schindler risked his life to save the train of 300 women that were supposed to arrive at his Brunlitz factory, but were rerouted to Auschwitz.
Commander of Auschwitz, he had talked to him on the phone, and they told him, you don't want them, they are old, they've been here a long time, they're not good anymore. I will send you a new one. We have a new transport coming. And he said, no, those are my workers and they are trained and I want them. So they let us leave.
Schindler was among the few individuals who were brave enough to put their livelihood up at stake and defy the party. Other ordinary German families also hid Jews in their cabinets, attics, and closets. They too had morals that could not be changed by the Nazi Party or their propaganda. Families like the Vader family and the Kurzbach family strived to be upstanders during the Holocaust, but were only able to save individuals. What sets Oskar apart was the fact that he saved such a large number of Jews. Not all German citizens had the financial or social advantages that Schindler did. Schindler used his money and his Nazi Party connections to get what he wanted. He was constantly bribing, persuading, and negotiating for the lives of his Jews. It is estimated that Oskar spent a total of 40 million German marks, or 27 million current US dollars, in order to save his Jews. His unique situation allowed him to save Jews on a large scale. Schindler's responsibility towards the Jews paid off directly and indirectly. He decided he could not stand by and watch one group of people become scapegoats for the entire country. This resulted in him taking matters into his own hands and using his means to save 1,200 Jewish people. Not only was this effect a direct influence, but there are hundreds of Jews today that attribute their lives to the compassion of Oskar Schindler. Rena Finder is one of these survivors and lives on as one of only 6 Schindler Jews in the United States today.
He gave me life. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be alive. And so I wouldn't be married, I wouldn't have children, or grandchildren, or great-grandchildren, and that goes for every one of them. Like, most of my friends, some of my friends say we were born twice. First we were born because of our mother, and then we were reborn because Oskar Schindler saved us.
One of the Jews Schindler saved was Moshe Beck, who survived to sit on Israel's Supreme Court bench. Not only did he owe his life to Schindler, but it is inevitable that Oskar must have influenced and taught Moshe Beck what real justice means. Steven Spielberg was so moved by Schindler's story after directing Schindler's List that he started the Shoah Visual History Foundation in order to record and spread the stories of over 50,000 Holocaust survivors. Morally, Schindler teaches us to not have prejudices and stay away from racial or religious tendencies. He promotes a modern-day world in which people are tolerant of each other, despite differences. By analyzing what happened to Jews in the hands of German citizens versus the effects of what happened to Jews in the hands of Schindler, we have a model for what a responsible citizen looks like.
He was very unique, and his uniqueness, I think, will forever live on, to teach people not to be a bystander, but to be an upstander.
Schindler's acts gives the world today the idea of not turning a blind eye to immorality, but instead being proactive in what is right. If history were to repeat itself, we should mirror the model of Oskar Schindler, who acted as a responsible citizen. instead of following the German citizens who either ignored genocide or failed to act upon the severity of it.